In the spring of 1946, a soldier stepped off a train in Ohio with a duffel bag on his shoulder and a Luger wrapped in an oil-soaked sock at the very bottom of it. He never told his wife. 20 years later, spooked by new laws and older memories, he sealed it in a mason jar and buried it beneath the oak in his backyard. He died without ever digging it up. Stories like his are scattered across America, tucked into gardens, cellar walls, and fence posts nobody thought to check. These were the war trophies a generation carried home, then hid from the world. Some were found by accident. Most never were. Let's count down 25 forgotten guns that World War II veterans buried in their backyards and the secrets that went into the ground with them. Let's begin with number 25. Number 25. The Japanese Type 26 revolver was the humblest trophy a Pacific veteran could bring home, and often the most quietly forgotten. Issued to Japanese cavalry and rear echelon troops, this stubby six-shot revolver was already obsolete by 1941, its design borrowing from European patterns of the previous century. American GIS picked them up off surrendered officers and battlefield dead, more curiosity than prize. Back in farmhouses across Iowa and Missouri, the little revolver rarely earned a place on the mantel. It got wrapped in a rag and dropped into a coffee can, then buried at the edge of a vegetable garden when the veteran decided he wanted no reminder of the islands. Decades later, a grandson turning soil for tomatoes would strike something hard, and out would come a rusted shape nobody in the family could name. The Type 26 was the trophy that came home unloved and left the world unremembered. Number 24. The Czech VZ-27, stamped by the Germans as the Pistole 27, was a compact pistol churned out under Nazi occupation and carried by second-line German troops across Europe. Reliable, plain, and produced in enormous numbers, it was exactly the kind of sidearm a young American liberating a Czech town might slip into his jacket. It carried no glamour, no eagle and swastika mystique that collectors would later chase. That plainness is why so many were hidden and abandoned. A veteran in Pennsylvania coal country, uneasy about a pistol with foreign proof marks he couldn't read, wrapped his in newspaper and cemented it into a hollow he'd left in his cellar wall. It stayed there through his lifetime and his widow's, discovered only when new owners knocked the wall out for a remodel. The VZ-27 was ordinary in life and ordinary in its hiding, which is exactly why it vanished so completely. Number 23. The Beretta model. 1934 was the sidearm of the Italian officer, and for the men who fought through Sicily and up the boot of Italy, it was the trophy closest to hand. Small, curved, and elegant in the way Italian design tends to be, it slipped easily into a musette bag among socks and cigarettes. Thousands crossed the Atlantic this way, undeclared and unremarked, but a pistol taken from a surrendered enemy carried a weight some men never wanted to feel again. A veteran in rural Georgia, who spoke of the war to no one, buried his Beretta in a fruit jar under the smokehouse floor, packed in lard to keep the rust away. His family only learned of it when the old smokehouse was pulled down, the jar surfacing intact, the little pistol still gleaming under its greasy coat. The Beretta 1934 was beauty a man chose to bury rather than remember. Number 22. The Carcano rifle, Italy's standard-issue infantry weapon, was long, awkward, and unloved even by the soldiers it was issued to. American troops in the Mediterranean gathered them by the truckload, and more than a few soldiers shipped one home as proof they'd been there. But a full-length rifle is a hard thing to hide in a small house. When post-war anxieties crept in, some veterans simply committed the carcano to the earth. A farmer in Kansas dug a narrow trench along a fence line, greased the rifle, wrapped it in oilcloth, and laid it down like a body. He marked the spot in his memory alone. When he passed, the memory went with him, and the rifle stayed under the fence, slowly surrendering to the prairie. The carcano was too big to keep and too charged to throw away, so a generation split the difference and gave it to the ground. Number 21. The Sauer 38H was a sleek German pocket pistol favored by Luftwaffe pilots and staff officers, its rounded lines a mark of quality craftsmanship. For the GI who captured an airfield or searched a surrendered command post, it was a prize worth pocketing. Compact enough to conceal, handsome enough to admire, it was the sort of trophy a man kept longer than most. And that was the problem. As the years passed and gun laws tightened, veterans who had held on to their Sauers grew nervous about papers they had never filed. A machinist in Michigan, rather than risk questions, sealed his in a length of capped pipe and buried it beneath his workshop's concrete floor. He poured a fresh slab over the top and never spoke of it. The Sauer 38H was the elegant secret a careful man decided was safer underground than in a drawer. Number 20. The Mauser HSC was another refined German pocket pistol, streamlined and modern, carried by officers and Kriegsmarine personnel. Its smooth profile made it one of the most desirable small trophies of the war, and American servicemen prized them accordingly. But desirability cut both ways. A pistol worth keeping was a pistol worth worrying over, and worry drove a great many of these guns into hiding. In coastal Maine, a Navy veteran who had brought his HSC back from occupation duty grew convinced, in the paranoid years of the late 1960s, that the government would come for unregistered war guns. He rowed out, thought better of dropping it in the bay, and instead buried it in his dune grass backyard in a lard tin. Sand and salt air ate at the tin for 50 years before a septic crew turned it up. The Mauser HSC was quality a man loved, then feared, then abandoned to the coast. Number 19. The Nambu Type 94 has a grim nickname among collectors, the suicide pistol, earned by a design flaw that let it fire if the exposed sear bar was bumped. Ugly, cramped, and awkward in the hand, it was nonetheless one of the most common Japanese pistols brought home from the Pacific. GIS took them off officers by the hundreds. Few families treasured the strange little gun once the war faded, and its reputation for firing unexpectedly made cautious veterans want it as far from their children as possible. A father in Oregon, unwilling to keep such a thing in the house, wrapped his Type 94 in wax paper and buried it deep at the back of his property, past where anyone played. It stayed lost for 2 generations. The property sold twice, the burial spot swallowed by a growing hedge. The Type 94 was the trophy a man hid not from the law, but from his own family's safety. Number 18. The Radom Vis UZs 35 was Poland's finest pistol, a robust and accurate design that the Germans seized and continued producing after they overran the country in 1939. Late war examples, roughly finished by forced labor, told their own bitter story. American soldiers captured them from German troops across the Western Front. and the Radom made its way home in duffel bags, like so many others. But a pistol built by a conquered nation for its conquerors carried a heaviness some veterans couldn't articulate. One, a quiet man in Wisconsin, buried his Radom in the woods behind his barn, choosing a spot beneath a particular birch so he could find it if he ever wanted to. He never did. The birch fell in a storm decades later, and the pistol lay undisturbed beneath the rotting trunk. The Radom Vis was a captive nation's craftsmanship, carried home and given back to the earth. Number 17. The Soviet Tokarev TT-33 reached American hands by stranger routes than most, changing pockets across the chaos of a collapsing Europe, traded, captured, or picked up where fronts collided. For the GI, who ended up with one, it was an oddity, a Russian pistol among German trophies, its origins hard to explain. That mystery made it easy to lose track of. A veteran in upstate New York, unsure what he even had, dropped his Tokarev into an ammunition can and buried the whole thing under a stone wall he was building. The wall stood for 60 years. When a descendant finally dismantled it for the fieldstone, the rusted can came apart in his hands. The pistol inside fused into a single orange mass. The Tokarev was the accidental trophy, buried almost as an afterthought and forgotten just as easily. Number 16. The Type 100 submachine gun was a rarity, even in Japanese service, produced in modest numbers and seldom seen by the average GI. To bring one home was a genuine coup, and the veterans who managed it knew they held something unusual. But an automatic weapon was a different order of trophy. Federal law had regulated machine guns since 1934, and a veteran who understood that grew wary of the very prize he'd fought to keep. In the Pacific Northwest, one such man, a Marine who'd carried his Type 100 back from Okinawa, realized in the 1950s that the paperwork he'd never filed could mean prison. Rather than surrender it, he sealed it in a metal drum, filled the drum with grease, and buried it under his woodpile. The woodpile became a shed. The shed became someone else's. The Type 100 was the trophy whose rarity became its curse, buried by the fear of the law it violated. Number 15. The Walther PPK was small, refined, and instantly recognizable. The pistol of German officers and officials, later immortalized far beyond its wartime role. For American servicemen, capturing a PPK meant capturing a piece of the enemy's authority, and the little pistol was among the most coveted trophies of all. Precisely because it was so desirable, it was also among the most nervously hidden. A veteran in Connecticut kept his PPK proudly for 20 years, then, rattled by the news and the new gun laws of 1968, decided overnight to make it disappear. He wrapped it in an oiled cloth, slid it into a section of drain pipe, and buried it beneath his rose garden at midnight. His wife never knew. He tended those roses until he died, the pistol 6 feet from where he knelt each spring. The Walther PPK was pride turned to fear, buried beneath the flowers a man raised over it. Number 14. The Arisaka Type 38 was Japan's older service rifle, long and slender, a holdover from an earlier era that still filled the ranks throughout the war. American troops captured them in staggering numbers across the Pacific, and shipping one home was almost a rite of passage. But a rifle nearly 5 feet long is impossible to tuck away discreetly, and as the decades passed, many families found themselves with an old Japanese gun nobody wanted and nobody knew how to be rid of. A veteran's son in Tennessee, clearing his late father's estate, chose not to sell or surrender the Type 38, but to bury it, wrapped in a tarp, in the back 40 where his father had once hunted. He told himself he was honoring something. The rifle simply vanished into the red clay. The Arisaka Type 38 was the everyday trophy so common it became invisible, then buried into true non-existence. Number 13. The Mauser C96, the broom handle, was already an antique by the Second World War, its distinctive box magazine and wooden shoulder stock a relic of the previous conflict. Yet Germans still carried them, and American soldiers who found one held a piece of history a generation older than the war they were fighting. That age gave the broom handle a peculiar power, the sense of holding something truly old. A machinist in Illinois treasured his for years before deciding, as his health failed, that no one should find it among his things. He crated it carefully, packed it in sawdust and grease, and buried the crate in his orchard beneath an apple tree he had planted the year he came home. Tree and gun aged together underground and above it. When the orchard was cleared for a subdivision, a bulldozer split the rotted crate open. The C96 was living history, buried by a man who could not bear to explain it. Number 12. The Gewehr 43 was Germany's answer to the fast-firing rifles the war demanded, a semi-automatic weapon produced late and in a hurry, its rough finish betraying the collapsing factories that made it. For the American infantryman, capturing one was capturing the enemy's desperation, a modern weapon that spoke of how the war had changed. Veterans who brought them home held something mechanically significant, and some understood it as more than a curiosity. But a distinctive military rifle drew questions, and questions were what many veterans most wanted to avoid. One, a factory worker in Ohio, disassembled his Gewehr 43, greased each part, and buried the pieces in separate coffee cans across his yard so that no single hole would ever give up the whole gun. He drew no map. When he died, the pieces stayed scattered underground, a puzzle no one knew existed. The Gewehr 43 was the trophy. A careful man took apart and gave to the earth in fragments. Number 11. Beretta Model 38. Submachine gun was among the finest automatic weapons of the war. Well-made, controllable, and prized by the Italian and German troops who carried it. For the GI in Italy, capturing one was a mark of hard fighting, and a handful made the long journey home despite regulations that should have stopped them cold. An automatic weapon carried the same legal shadow as any machine gun, and the veterans who kept theirs lived quietly with a secret that grew heavier each year. In New Jersey, one such man, aging and afraid of what his family might inherit, sealed his Beretta in a length of sewer pipe, capped both ends with tar, and sank it into the marshy corner of his lot where the ground was always soft. The marsh took it gladly. No probe ever found it. The Beretta Model 38 was excellence a man could neither register nor destroy, so he drowned it in the mud. Number 10. The MG-42 was the most feared automatic weapon of the war, a belt-fed machine gun whose blistering rate of fire gave it a shriek soldiers never forgot. Bringing one home was almost unheard of, a feat of will and logistics, but a few determined veterans managed it, hauling the heavy weapon back in crates marked as machine parts. What they did with it afterward was another matter entirely. A weapon like this could not sit in a closet. A veteran in rural Minnesota, unwilling to surrender the prize he'd carried across an ocean, dug a pit in his cow pasture, lined it with straw and grease-soaked canvas, and buried the MG-42 like treasure. He meant to keep it forever, hidden, but his. He died suddenly, and the pasture was sold to a neighbor who never knew what lay beneath his grazing herd. The MG-42 was the war's most terrible sound, silenced under a field of quiet cattle. Number 9. The Arisaka Type 99 was Japan's improved wartime rifle, and by war's end, the last-ditch versions were crude things, cast from whatever the crumbling empire had left, fitted with wooden parts and rough iron sights. American Marines captured them across the final island battles, and these rifles came home marked with a chrysanthemum seal, the Emperor's own crest, often ground off before surrender. That defaced crest told a story of a nation's collapse. A veteran in California, haunted by what he'd seen taking those islands, wanted the rifle gone but couldn't bring himself to destroy it. He buried the Type 99 in his citrus grove, deep beneath a lemon tree, wrapped in an old army blanket. The blanket rotted, the wood rotted, the steel corroded, and the grove was eventually paved for a shopping center. The Arisaka Type 99 was the trophy of a war's brutal end, buried by a man trying to bury the memory with it. Number 8. The Walther signal pistol was not a weapon of war in the usual sense, a flare gun built to launch illumination and colored signals across the battlefield. Yet these too came home in duffel bags by the thousands, easy to carry and harmless looking, a soldier's souvenir with none of the menace of a real gun. That very innocence is why so many ended up forgotten. A flare pistol was the kind of thing a veteran tossed in a footlocker and never thought about again. And when the footlocker was cleared out decades later, the odd brass and steel object often went into the ground with the rest. One family in Texas buried a whole box of their late grandfather's war effects, the signal pistol among them, in the corner of a horse paddock, treating it as a burial of memory itself. The Walther signal pistol was the gentle trophy, buried not from fear, but from forgetting. Number 7. The Carabiner 98K was the backbone of the German army, the bolt-action rifle carried by millions of soldiers from Poland to Normandy to the ruins of Berlin. To capture a K-98 was to hold the standard weapon of the enemy, and no trophy came home in greater numbers. But abundance bred neglect. A rifle every veteran seemed to have was a rifle no one thought special, and as the men aged, these Mausers became clutter that families struggled to unload. A veteran in the Dakotas, tired of the rifle leaning in his closet and wary of the paperwork he imagined selling it might require, simply dug a trench in his shelter belt, greased the K-98, and laid it to rest among the tree roots. He was one of countless men who did the same across the country. The Carabiner 98K was the ordinary soldier's trophy, so common that thousands were quietly, unceremoniously given to the American soil. Number 6. The Nambu Type 14 was the closest thing the Pacific War offered to a glamorous trophy, its slender silhouette earning it the nickname the Japanese Luger among GIS who prized it. To bring one home from the islands was to bring home the war's most recognizable enemy sidearm, and Marines and soldiers coveted them fiercely. That very fame made the Type 14 a target for worry once the veterans were home. A pistol everyone recognized was a pistol that drew attention, and attention was what a haunted man least wanted. A veteran in the Ozarks, who never once spoke of Iwo Jima, wrapped his Nambu in a rag soaked in gun oil, sealed it in a canning jar, and buried it beneath the roots of a walnut tree at the far edge of his land. He visited the spot sometimes, said his family, but never dug. The Nambu Type 14 was the Pacific's proudest trophy, hidden by a pride too painful to display. Number 5. The MP-40 submachine gun was the iconic weapon of the German soldier. Its folding stock and distinctive shape burned into the memory of every GI who faced it. To capture one was a genuine prize, the enemy's signature automatic weapon in your own hands. But that word, automatic, was the shadow over every MP-40 that came home. Federal law had regulated such weapons for a decade before the war, and a veteran who kept his MP-40 was keeping a felony, however he had earned it. Fear did the rest. In the industrial Midwest, one veteran, terrified after the gun laws of 1968 that a knock might come to his door, drove into the countryside, dug through the frozen ground with a pickaxe, and buried his MP-40 wrapped in a truck tarp far from any road. He told no one, not even his sons. The MP-40 was the trophy every man wanted and the law forbade, buried by the thousands in a cold panic. Number 4. The Walther P-38 was the modern successor to the Luger, the pistol Germany designed to arm its officers by the millions. And for that reason, it was one of the most common and coveted handguns to cross the Atlantic in a soldier's bag. Rugged, accurate, and unmistakably military, it was the pistol a veteran was most likely to keep proudly for years and most likely to panic over later. The P-38's very popularity meant that when fear of confiscation spread through the veteran community, an enormous number of these pistols went underground almost at once. A steel worker in Pennsylvania, who had shown his P-38 to friends for 2 decades, abruptly buried it one autumn in a mason jar beneath his garden shed, unwilling to explain the change of heart. His grandchildren found it only when the shed collapsed. The Walther P-38 was the proud trophy that fear turned into a secret, buried across America in gardens and cellars beyond counting. Number 3. The Sturmgewehr STG-44 was the most historically significant weapon a veteran could possibly bring home. The world's first true assault rifle, the gun that every modern military weapon would descend from. Few American soldiers captured one, and fewer still managed to ship it back. But those who did held the future of firearms in their hands, though most had no idea. Its rarity and its automatic action made it doubly dangerous to own openly, a felony and a fortune buried in the same object. A veteran in the Appalachian foothills, understanding only that his strange German rifle was trouble, sealed it in a lead-lined chest and buried it in a dry cave mouth on his mountain property. He guarded the secret his whole life. When the land was logged decades later, the chest was found. The STG-44 inside, worth more than the veteran's entire farm had ever been. The Sturmgewehr was history itself, buried by a man who never knew its worth. Number 2. The Japanese Type 99 light machine gun was the trophy that almost never made it home. A bipod-mounted, magazine-fed weapon hauled back against every odd by a handful of Marines who refused to leave their hardest-won prize behind. Weapons like it rarely survived the journey, and the veteran who kept one kept something the law would never permit. One such Marine in Hawaii, rebuilding a civilian life on the islands he'd nearly died taking, buried his Type 99 in volcanic soil behind his home, wrapped in canvas and packed in grease. The porous ground and the tropical damp went to work on it at once. When his family finally uncovered it, only a corroded skeleton remained. The Type 99 light machine gun was the impossible trophy, buried and slowly eaten by the very land the war had been fought over. Number 1. And finally, at number 1, the Luger P-08, the single most legendary bring-back gun of the entire war, the pistol that every American family seems to believe their grandfather carried home. Its distinctive toggle action and graceful lines made it the most desired trophy of all. The prize, a G I would trade anything for and guard with his life on the long voyage home. Hundreds of thousands crossed the Atlantic this way, tucked into socks and packs and the false bottoms of footlockers. And because it was so treasured, the Luger was also the gun most often buried when fear finally came. A veteran who had shown his Luger off proudly for 20 years would, in a single anxious night, wrap it in wax paper, seal it in a jar, and commit it to the earth beneath the family oak, telling no one, planning to dig it up someday. Someday rarely came. Across America, in gardens and orchards and quiet backyards, uncounted Lugers still lie exactly where frightened, aging men left them, waiting for a shovel that has not yet struck. The Luger P-08 was the war's most coveted prize and its most common secret, the trophy a generation carried home in triumph and buried in silence. From the humble Type 26 revolver to the legendary Luger, these 25 forgotten guns tell one shared story of young men who carried the enemy's weapons across an ocean as proof they had survived, and old men who buried them out of fear, grief, or the simple wish to forget. Some have surfaced by accident. Countless others are still down there, wrapped in oilcloth and sealed in jars, waiting in the American soil. If your grandfather served, there may be a shovel's worth of history on the old family land. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more forgotten stories the history books left buried.